My name is Dick Clarke, and I'm the president of the board of Renew, and I'm one of the design principals of Envirotecture. Thanks to Anna, and editor, who happens to be editor of the best magazine in Australia, Sanctuary, of course, and the great panelists for the last session. That was really good. Today, I am calling in from the traditional lands of the Guy Marieagle people of the Eora Nation in what was once called Warang, better known these days as Sydney. And therefore, I also extend my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Throughout today, we've been sharing the Aboriginal lands that we're joining from, and I encourage you, if you haven't already, to just join in the chat and say hi and tell us which part of the country you're calling in from, with both names if you can. That'd be great to get an idea of where we are spread around the land. Before we do get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, without whom, as they say, this would not be possible, because nothing happens for free, sadly, if only it did. So we're very grateful to the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, to NatHERS, to Your Home. You should be familiar with the Your Home technical manual. It's a wonderful resource. Design for Place, Bank Australia, Sonnen, Hip versus Hype, Design Matters National, and Lighthouse Architecture and Science. So thanks to all of those organisations and the wonderful people within them. Next, I'd like to introduce our fantastic panellists. First, welcome to Gareth Graham, who owns Wanley. Now, Graham, you're going to have, sorry, Gareth, you're going to have to correct my pronunciation on that in a second, because I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly. But it's a round earth home in Myrtleford with a priority for self-sufficiency and efficiency. And those two things go hand in hand. Powering the home is 5.6 kilowatts of solar and 54 kilowatt hours of batteries. And there's a story as to what that battery installation is, and we'll get into that shortly. Also joining us is Christine Kennedy. Christine is the General Manager at Total Solar Solutions and a founding member of Australian Women in Solar Energy, which is aptly acronymized, is there such a word? I just made it up, as AWISE. That's a beautiful acronym. And finally, we welcome the inimitable Finn Peacock. Finn is a self-prescribed solar nerd, and I think most other people describe him as a solar nerd as well. He's ex-CSIRO, and he founded an organisation called Solar Quotes, and they have provided over 600,000 quotes since 2009. That's a lot of quotes.
It's nearly $750,000 now.
Oh, really? Okay, there we go. Out of date already. Gareth, can you let us know how I should have pronounced the name of your property?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Dick. Wanley. It's Welsh. Wanley, I think it's Welsh. My dad would probably correct me, but he's no longer with us. Was the name of my grandfather's property where he raised cows back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. 5 acres. That's all he needed to raise cows and produce milk.
Yeah, okay, great. All right. Well, look, let's get stuck into it. Please, people, feed us through your questions into the Q&A. And we have some questions which have been sent in a little earlier, which we'll kick off with. So one of the main ones that we hear a lot of people asking is, how many kilowatts of solar do I need? Christine, what lifestyle choices and other factors do people need to consider when they make this decision?
Yeah, it's definitely something to do a bit of research on when pulling the trigger on purchasing a solar system. I guess a really good starting point for people is looking at their electricity bill and looking at the daily kilowatt hour usage that they've got there on their electricity bill. But firstly, you would probably want to have a look at, does that differ much between summer, winter, autumn and spring? So looking at whether your usage is really consistent year round, or whether it's higher in different times of the year. And then from there, that will you a good idea of what size system you probably need to look at as a starting point. So some people get confused between kilowatt hours and kilowatts. So here in Melbourne, we sort of work off roughly 4 sun hours per day. So for example, if you've got 20 kilowatt hours of usage per day, that doesn't mean that you need a 20 kilowatt solar system. That means that you might need a solar system that's about 5 kilowatt of solar. We times that by an average of 4 sun hours a day. So roughly that would be 20 kilowatt hours. But that would be different at different times of the year. So that's a really good starting point to look at your electricity bill. From there, I would have a really good think about what are you using at the moment and what are you looking to maybe change later down the track? Have you got an old gas hot water system that you're thinking about, well, that might last us another 2 to 5 years, and when that dies, we'll look at upgrading to a heat pump hot water system and moving that load to electric. And also, you know, a lot of people are looking at getting electric cars, looking at, you know, maybe if you're getting a pool or a spa in the future, things like that, to just make sure that the solar system that you're getting now, that your family won't be outgrowing, you know, in the near future. So looking at both long-term plans as well as those shorter-term plans, you know, within 12 months to 2 years as well, is a really good starting point.
Yeah, no, that's great. Gareth, how did you size your solar and battery system, and tell us a little bit, you know, how it relates to the grid or lack of grid and that return on the investment?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. We're completely off grid. Our decision was based back in 2005 when we got a quote for $27,000 to bring power to our property, and we were always keen on a solar option anyway. So at that stage, it cost us $40,000 to set up a solar system, of which we got an $8,000 rebate. So $32,000. It cost us probably $6,000 or $7,000 more than connecting to the grid. At that time, panels were extremely expensive. They're probably about $10 a watt. So we put in what we could afford, which was 1,650 watts of panels at about $16,000, significantly cheaper these days. So, and because we put in obviously lead acid batteries, 1,660 amp hour batteries at 24 volts, the system was going okay, but would still require a lot of support over winter with the generator. And as a result of really not being able to put in as much power as the batteries needed, they were never really properly fully charged often enough. So in 2017, they got replaced because they were dead. You know, we were having to run the generator more and more. The batteries, we at that stage, 2017, lithiums were still just fairly new on the market. So being a bit hesitant, we put in lead acids again. So they've now been going for 5 years, and I'm hoping to get another 8 years out of them. And they're actually doing quite okay. 2200 amp batteries. So most things these days, it's all lithiums. And although I'm hoping by the time these batteries die, we've got some better alternatives to choose from. So this was also when we replaced the batteries in 2017, we had to upgrade inverters, chargers, and basically everything else that went along with it. So it was another complete system. Now, I can't remember what that cost. I think it was probably another $25,000, I suspect, maybe a little less. Running the generator on the first system, it averaged out to $632 worth of fuel a year. With the new system, $234 a year. But fuel is now a lot dearer than it was then. So we were probably using a fairly significant amount of fuel. We're still using the same generator, but it hasn't been on since October. And even then, it only done 8 hours last October.
Would you consider it to be economically viable given rising fuel costs and so on, to simply expand your PV system in the future?
Very interesting you ask that. Now, in the background, you'll see, if I get things here, this is our panels on the shed. This area out the front is about to get another 6 kilowatts of panels.
Okay.
But they will be actually dedicated to charging our EV, which we've had for about 16 months. But unfortunately, over winter, it didn't get a lot of use because we don't produce enough power, to support an EV over winter. It's fine over summer, but so they're coming on soon.
Okay, that's great. I suspect that there will be more questions about solar and batteries and EVs coming through from the audience. So hold that thought. We might end up revisiting that one. Finn, you've supported thousands of Australians to find a reputable solar installer. What would you say consumers should be looking for when they're trying to find a good one?
Well, that's a good question. So I would say, if you can think of a Venn diagram and you've got 3 circles, you want the intersection of local, someone that does quality work, and a company that gives you good customer service. So how do you find those? Well, local, the best way is Google Maps. I'd say Google Maps, not Google Search. On Google Search, unfortunately, you're at the mercy of lots of ads, often filling the first page, and not necessarily the guys that are good at solar, but the guys that are good at SEO. So go to Google Maps, and that's a good way to find locals. Then you need to, if you want to quality work, that's hard for the layperson, to be fair, but what you'll find is that a solar installation company that's proud of its installations will generally plaster their Facebook page with photos of those installations because they're so proud of them. So because it's so easy to upload to Facebook. So have a look at their Facebook page. Hopefully there's lots of images of proud installations on there. Have a look at the panels on the roof. Look for the layperson can look for nicely lined up panels, not hanging over the edge of the saddles or the edge of the roof, nicely centered on the roof. No flexible conduit ideally on the roof or going over the edge. Then have a look at the inverter picks and the battery picks. Look for excessive use of conduit. Sometimes you have to use conduit. Often you don't. Is it neat? Is it, simple stuff like, is it at right angles? Does it look neat to you? Look at where the wires go into the inverter. And then even the layperson can get a good feel for the quality of workmanship. And then customer service. So the best way to ascertain if their customer service is any good is to look at online reviews. Now, the crucial thing there's 2 crucial things. One, don't just look at one reviews platform, look at lots of them, and you're looking for consistency across reviews platforms. You want to see them within about 0.2 of a star rating. So look at product review, look at solar quotes, look at Facebook, look at Google, and see how they go. You might find, especially the big companies, are very good at gaming one platform, and they might look really good on that one platform. And then the ones that are harder to game, like Google, Facebook, solar quotes, their rating might be wildly different. So look for that. And also go to the little filter, look for the 1-star reviews. Now, every solar installer makes mistakes. What you want to know is, what was the mistake and did they fix it? So if someone put a leak in the roof and then refused to fix it, and then the house filled with water, you don't want to go with that company. Right. If they put a leak in the roof accidentally, it happens, and then they went out of their way to fix it, then, it's a shame that they put a hole in the roof, but everyone makes mistakes. They fix the problem. So there's that to look for. The one more thing I'd say is look for years of experience with 1, 2, or 3 brands. And that's becoming more and more important as we get to batteries and dynamic control of solar, because a solar installer's job, I talk to a lot of solar installers, and a lot of their job is becoming more like IT support. They've got to connect the Wi-Fi, they've got to look at the data cables, they've got to commission the software, they've got to download the latest firmware. And the way they get good at getting everything to talk to each other is by having ideally years of experience with certain brands. So looking for an installer that doesn't chop and change brands every 5 minutes.
Interesting that you mentioned, you essentially referenced aesthetics, not being nicely centered on the roof, etc. Difficult question to answer this one, but I'm going to throw it out there because it comes up. How do you balance the need for beautiful aesthetics with the need for efficiency?
Well, that's a good question. So there are regulations around what's called exclusion zones. So that's generally 200 millimeters from the edge of the roof. I personally, I can get into trouble with this, don't have a problem with people breaching that occasionally to get more watts on, as long as it's not too egregious. So how do you balance it? It's the installers have a good sense for this. The good installers have a good sense for this. I mean, some installers go way too far and they will massively limit how many kilowatts you can put on your roof, because they'll want to be really risk averse about stuff like exclusion zones. So there's a good balance, but generally, if it looks crap on the roof, imagine what it looks like in the roof cavity where no one can see.
Okay, that's great. Look, we've got a question here. There are a lot of questions, and I don't know if we're going to have time to get through them in half an hour, but let's go. Judith asks, when should I consider three-phase?
So three-phase, I would consider if you want a bigger solar system, because three-phase basically lets you go 3 times as big. So, and as we go more electric, more and more people are finding that they need more than they can fit, than they're allowed to fit on a single-phase home. So three-phase is great for getting bigger systems and having more flexibility. So especially when you're getting electric cars, it's very common you want to go over the, typically 13.3 kilowatts of panels you're allowed on a single-phase connection.
And just following on from that, Amanda asks, if I have three-phase, can I feed 5 kilowatts into the grid per phase? And does that vary around the country?
It varies around the country. It depends on your local network, but generally, yes, most will allow 5 kilowatts per phase feed in, so you can feed in 15 kilowatts to the grid, which is pretty substantial.
Yeah. Christine, did you have any thoughts on those two questions?
Yeah, another thing with the three-phase power that we're seeing more and more of is a lot of residential properties that might only have single phase at the moment, looking to shift into to induction cooktops from gas, looking to shift to electric hot water systems, adding on EV charging, adding multiple split system air conditioners throughout the home. And what we're finding more and more frequently is that the loads coming in might only be a 40 amp supply, which, and then adding solar on top of that. Yeah, definitely if you're in the position to look at a new build and you're looking at installing single phase or three phase, and you know that electricity is really important to you, and things like, electric vehicles and those sorts of things, it's one thing that's definitely easier to do from the get-go rather than later down the track.
Gareth, I'm going to take a stab and say that your place is single phase. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there, I don't know the ins and outs of doing three-phase off-grid, but I imagine it's entirely possible. But then there might be an argument, Finn, you could comment on whether off-grid installations that do have things like EV charging and other heavy loads that might be better off going three-phase.
Oh, well, it gives you more flexibility in big loads, and it can certainly be done. There's great Selectronic and Victron solutions for three-phase off-grid, but it does start to get obviously more expensive. So, I mean, if you're clever like Gareth and you have dedicated circuits for your EV charging, and you're happy to charge it no more than 7 kilowatts, single phase is generally fine. The other thing about off-grid guys, off-grid people, is they're generally very efficient because they're so aware of the energy. So they generally don't have those huge loads. But having said that, I've seen some off-grid mansions, three-phase.
Yep. Adrian asks, is there an online tool for me to figure out how much solar can fit on my roof? Christine, is there something you can point him towards?
I haven't seen one for consumers. Finn might know more with consumers than I do, but certainly every solar retailer that I would know certainly is using a platform that allows us to design straight onto the roof with the particular solar panels that we would be using, with the inverters that we would be using on that particular house, and that includes also the degree in which those panels would be facing as well. So it does some pretty whiz-bang calculations that spit out that customers can see how many kilowatt hours it would be producing and what their self-consumption would be looking like as well. But Finn may know of something that's accessible for customers directly.
Yeah, for sure. So on our website, we've got a really rudimentary one. If you go to the tools menu, there's a solar panel fitting tool that will give you a really rough idea of how many panels you can fit on your roof. All I would say is that's great for doing your initial calculations, but the professional designer will know all the regulations about where they can actually go and where it makes sense for them to go. And there's all sorts of stuff like, you know, how the roof's built and where the racks are going to go and whether they're going to go portrait or landscape to make sure that you clamp the panels in the right place. So a great place if you just want a really rough idea of how many kilowatts will fit on your roof. Tools, solar panel fitting tool on Solar Quotes. The other kind of hack you can do is there's a tool called Pylon, which the installers use, and you can register for a free account on that. It's called, I think it's getpylon.com. You can, if you want to play around and pretend to be an installer, you can get a free account with that, and you get a limited amount of credits for high resolution aerial imagery, and you can use his advanced tools. But yeah, once you've done your own estimates, leave the placing of the panels to the installer, because there's a lot of things you've got to take into account.
Indeed. Heather asks, how do you determine solar needs for a brand new build when you don't have existing bills, electricity bills as a guide? I might jump in on that one. Just as a building designer, one of the things that should happen is that your building and its appliances and systems can go into a spreadsheet, and you select what kind of appliance it is, what its load is, and you make a very careful estimate of how many hours in the average week of the year it's going to be used, and they're going to vary, of course, between seasons, and you come up with a running total per month or week, if you like, through the year, and typically your winter loads are going to be higher than your summer loads, and then you size your system around how much self-sufficiency you want. And use that as your guide, but there's a little bit of work in it, and it can be difficult to do in the very early stages of design. It's not too hard to do once you've got a good final CAD model or a design developed to some extent, and you've got some idea of what's going to go into it. So from a designer's point of view, that would be my answer. I don't know if any of the panelists would have anything you want to add to that.
Renew is a non-profit membership organisation. Along with running Sustainable House Day, we also inform government policy, advocate for a fair energy transition, provide resources for climate disaster resilience, and publish 2 magazines. Sanctuary Magazine provides trusted independent information for people looking to build or renovate sustainably. Renew magazine is a leading voice on sustainable technology developments shaping the energy transition. These magazines grew from member newsletters in the 1980s and still maintain their grassroots independence and practical approach. Both are incredible resources, and subscribing is a great way to support us to transform Australian homes for climate and energy resilience.
If I was building a house today, I would fill my... First thing I'd do is I'd design the roof for solar. So I'd have a nice big north-facing roof at a sensible angle, and then I'd fill that baby with solar panels, because the solar rebate essentially covers the hardware cost of a reasonable panel. And once you've got those guys on the roof and you want bags of power on overcast days and through winter, yeah, fill the roof. It'll be a great investment in your new house, and I think it'll make you very happy.
Christine, would you disagree with that?
No, I think you're on the money there with that one. Certainly it is a little bit more challenging. There's a little bit more research that's involved when it is a new build, looking at each of those appliances, compiling them together in some way. So a spreadsheet is great. And then working with someone who will take on custom designing something and for your property. I really believe that solar is not a one size fits all. And walking in with a spreadsheet somewhere and walking out with a solar package, really, you may not get what you're hoping to get with that experience. So definitely, compiling all of that information is a really great start, and then working with someone to essentially design something that's specific for that new build is a great idea. And if you do have the ability to design around, a compatible roof space for solar, it's a really good opportunity. I was fortunate enough to do that a couple of years ago, and definitely made the most of as much north-facing roof as we possibly could as well, and haven't regretted it at all.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, don't desecrate that beautiful new house by slapping a solar system on after the fact without thinking it through.
You got any thoughts on that, Gareth?
Yeah, we purchased this property with a pure, one of the main things we looked at was we had a north-facing view right from the start. So the house faced north, made it much easier to put your panels on the right orientation to get maximum benefits. Actually, I did notice in the chat, someone's asked about a skillion roof that faces south, and a solar installer has said it's not worth the effort because of wind loadings. There are tilt-up frames that should be able to withstand loadings. So I'm suspecting either the solar installer is either lazy or has got too much work on.
Yeah, we have Australian wind loading standards for a reason. So you can put a frame on your roof and they won't blow off.
Yeah,
yes,
quite important. Someone in the chat has just mentioned that the University of New South Wales have an online tool called sunspot.org.au.
Oh yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
To consumers, so it's not just for the staff and researchers at uni. Now, Margaret has asked about corrosion and being within a kilometre of breaking surf, and that has all sorts of building material specification issues that you have to work through. What impact does that have on a PV system?
So that can obviously, if you're using lower quality materials, they can obviously rust. So you want to use good quality racking. So that's the aluminium racking, and you want to use good quality fixings. And all panels are tested to withstand salt mist. I can't remember the exact standard, but all panels are tested for that. So talk to your installer, tell them it's make it clear that you want good quality panels, good quality fixings, and I think you'll be fine. And
when you say good quality fixings, I guess you're talking about stainless steel, effectively.
Yeah, marine grade stainless. Yep. I mean, if they're installing around those areas, they'll have installs that, probably on your street or a few streets away that have been there for years. So if you're worried about it, I'm sure they wouldn't mind, organising that you can go and have a look and check the state of those systems after they've been in that surf mist for a few years.
Okay. Margaret also wants to know about recycling of lithium. Does it play a part in the decision as to whether you use them in a battery or not? Lead acid batteries, of course, lead is very, very recyclable, I think more or less infinitely. But what happens to lithium batteries at the end of life? This is a changing space, of course, but at the moment, what's the situation at the moment? Christine, do you know about this in any detail, or Finn?
Yeah, well, there was another question as well about solar panel recycling too. So certainly end of life, there's some really big conversations happening in the renewable energy space about end of life. Here in Melbourne, we're really fortunate. We do have a solar panel recycler. They've just started in the first few years. Before then, the only way that we were recycling solar panels was taking them to a recycling plant where they basically knocked off the aluminium frames and they called that recycling. So certainly it's something that's really, really important in this space. And there's a lot of work that is being done at the moment. Certainly I would be surprised if something really, really good recycling might come along in the next year or two, I think, in regards to lithium as well. At the moment, it's really something that's a watch this space and work in progress. And we do maybe need to call on our governments, both state and federally, to step up in this scenario as well.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla are claiming, I think 98% of the Powerwall is recyclable. And look, we'll certainly reach the point where all the materials that go into a lithium-ion battery are recyclable. But to get there, we need the volume and we need the scale. And we're not quite there yet. So, in 10, 15, 20 years, when these batteries are going for disposal, I'm very confident they'll be almost 100% recyclable, because it's just so much cheaper to reclaim the materials if you've got good processes and you've got volume and scale than to dig them out of virgin ground.
It also probably requires a little bit of political leadership to ensure that there's more than one player in the space, so we don't end up with a red cycle debacle with the soft plastics.
Absolutely.
A question from Tim. This is a good one and a perennial, and it's really worth talking about. Are we better off purchasing a heat pump hot water system which uses 1/3 or probably less than 1/3 of the power of a much cheaper resistive hot water system and spend the difference in solar panels? In other words, is it better to have a really efficient building with a smaller PV system, or to have an inefficient building and just increase, put your foot harder on the accelerator? Gareth, you've got some experience with this, I guess. Given your time on a blank sheet of paper, which way would you go?
Yes, I would go maximum efficiency on the building and also as much panels as you can put on. That to me is the only logical answer in this day and age, with the panels are being so cheap.
Christine?
I would certainly look at efficiency of products first, and then look at the solar. It's great to have a really large solar system, but also if you're using a lot of electricity, sometimes in winter you might not have as much. So looking at efficiency first is a really good way to look at it.
Ben?
Yeah, I'm with Gareth. Go for an efficient home, go for a massive PV array, because the rebates are per panel. But where efficiency really comes into its own in saving money is you can get a much smaller battery.
Look, to my way of thinking, it's to choose to have an inefficient building and then power it up with PV is really like driving with your foot on the brake and just pushing harder on the accelerator.
And also, inefficient homes are just miserable to live in my experience. I've rented quite a few of them over my years.
Okay, thanks for that question, Tim. It's always good to get that one out of the way. Now, where are we? Is it safe to drink water collected off a solar panel roof? I think the answer is yes, perfectly fine. They're just glass. Are there alternatives to place solar panels on something other than the roof?
Absolutely. You can put them on a ground mount, but you're adding a lot of expense.
Yes, I'll speak to that as well. And I'll just point, if you can see the picture in the background, just here, these were our original panels. They were ground mounted. They're not connected up anymore, but they're still sitting there, although a couple have been pinched to put on a camper van.
Why did you put them on the ground at that point in time and not on the shed or the house?
Well, the shed wasn't there.
Right, good reason.
The shed was still in the planning stage, but council, being what councils are, you must build a house before you build a shed. And we just, the slope on, it's a curved roof on the house, but it just wasn't that steep. So we decided to go against that, and we didn't actually want to put anything on the roof of the house unless we had to.
Okay. Deb asks, I have a DC burned out solar panel unit and the company is avoiding fixing. Now, I'm not quite sure what she means, whether that's the terminal or what, but is that kind of problem? Can you see that question, Finn? I'm not sure if that's...
I can't, but if you've got something that's still under warranty, the person that you gave the money to is responsible for honouring that warranty. So what we do see is some of the shadier solar companies might say, oh, look, I'd love to honour your warranty, but the manufacturer, says says they won't. Well, the person that took your money, it doesn't matter what the manufacturer says under Australian consumer law, they have to honour not just the warranty that's written with it, they have to honour what's called a statutory Australian warranty, which is all about the word reasonable. So if the reasonable person, the typical person would think it's unreasonable that the thing's failed in that time frame, and you've got a good case. But yeah, if it's still in warranty or if it's still in a reasonable time frame, the person that sold you the thing has to honour the warranty if they're still around.
What about if they're a relatively smaller company and they're dealing with a larger company who may or may not be based somewhere in Eastern Asia, and they have gone back to that manufacturer who's said no? Would you pursue the small local guy in the hope that they would pass some heat on to the big boys?
They have to pay for it out of their own pocket. That's the legal position. That they made a commercial decision to go with these guys wherever they are. And if they knew anything about Australian consumer law, they'd know that whatever happens with the manufacturer, they have to honour the warranty, even if they've got to shell out to put a different brand on. Yeah, it's actually very, very tough for solar installers or any kind of retailer of high value equipment in Australia that they have that burden on them, but that's the Australian law.
Because the way out of that is all the fly-by-nighters that come in, put your solar on, and 6 months later they're gone, and they leave you with rubbish equipment.
Yeah, and this is why my fourth criteria for a good solar installer is people that have really good relationships with, 1 to 3 brands, because a good installer is not going to use a brand that doesn't give them good warranty support.
That's right.
Because it's you just can't run a business that way. While we talk about that, a really good question for a solar installer, if you're unsure, that brings almost everything out the woodwork, is, can you tell me about the last warranty claim you settled for a customer? And just listening to the company talk about that will tell you a lot about how they handle warranty claims, and we'll get to the crux of how they handle things when they don't go so well.
Christine, got any thoughts?
I'm not quite sure of the context of which this has happened, but it's a very unfortunate situation to be in, and it is one that, we get calls almost on a daily basis around assisting with something to do with a solar system that might have failed, and that person may not be able to get onto the original installer, or that relationship's broken down, or that person's not around anymore. So certainly I feel for this situation. But it is really important. I can't stress enough that people do their research when they are looking at purchasing a system, around not just the brands that they're purchasing, but also around the company that they're purchasing from too.
So in your experience, Finn and Christine, how common are failures, and who generally, who or what would be responsible?
So inverter failures are, I couldn't quantify it. Panel failures are getting rarer and rarer in my experience, which is great. I don't know what Christine's experience is, and inverter failures, they happen, fairly often. But if you've gone with a good retailer, they'll swap it out with a minimum of fuss, and you're generally getting at least a 10-year warranty on the inverters these days, and 25 years on the panels. So it's fairly low risk. Since they've DC isolators on the roof have become optional, that will be a great help, because that was generally the biggest cause of failure over the years.
Yeah, solar panel warranties are very few and far between in my experience. Inverters, they are an electronic appliance at the end of the day, and there can be failures that happen, but in my experience, it's all around how that manufacturer deals with that warranty, and how that installer deals with that warranty. That's important, and that is what leads to long-lasting relationships as well.
Okay, thank you for that. We could probably talk a lot more about that, but there are a lot more questions to get through here. Paul asks, solar and wind turbines combined, ? Gareth, have you thought about putting wind on as an auxiliary?
Yes and no. We have thought about it, but unfortunately we're in a bit of a gully, so we get virtually no wind here. 2 days a year is about all we get wind.
Yeah, so it's very site specific, isn't it?
Yes.
Christine, do you get this one at all? Not very often. Every now and then we might get someone that queries around wind, but in Metro Melbourne, it's not something that's really become particularly popular.
Ben?
So urban wind does not work. It does not work. You can see all these vertical axis turbines, every shape under the sun. It does not work because of the turbulence coming off the roofs. Wind works if you live in the middle of a big field and you've got a 10-meter pole you can stick a conventional turbine on top of. Then wind can work with solar, no problem. You can even put it through the same inverter. But yeah, urban wind, I have never, ever seen a design that works, and I've been looking for decades.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. And I've looked at a few things that have come up and looked like the great shining white hope, and for various reasons they just haven't quite worked. So shame, but look, I'm going to have to skip through and try and find the most pertinent questions here because there are so many and they're great. I'm sorry to all the people that we're going to have to skip over, but Richard in Adelaide or Kuanaland wants to know about community batteries. Are they better than individual batteries? And what's the benefit?
I'm happy to answer that one. I'm not a fan of community batteries. They're one of those things that sound great in theory. It's a battery owned by the community. There's one massive problem with them, which is that they're the wrong side of your meter. So not offsetting your full retail cost of electricity. They're on the network. They've got all the network charges and everything else that apply. So I've never seen a community battery that works financially for a homeowner. Christine?
I think it comes down to what's important for the person that's wanting the battery. So where we are, we're in outer eastern Melbourne. So we're on the cusp of the Dandenong Ranges and the edge of the Yarra Valley. So a lot of the batteries that we install are also for battery backup purposes. So people really want to utilize their own storage that they've got when they want it and it's important to them. So that's when the power's down and they don't want to lose the contents of their fridge. They want to have that storage. So we're not putting in as many batteries for people for nighttime use. Yes, there's a few, but a lot still really want that backup capability because at the end of the day, they kind of see it as, what's the point in me having a battery if I can't use it when I really need to use it and I'm desperate to use it? So I haven't had a lot of experience with community batteries, but I think, certainly side with where Finn sits on this one as well. People want to use their own power when they want to use it.
What about the other kind of battery? For instance, one of our sponsors, so I guess I can mention their name, Sonnen, have a scheme called Sonnen Flat, where you install a battery, and part of the arrangement is that every now and then, when the market is suitable, they can take a snippet of power if you've got excess, and with several thousand other snippets, put together a couple of megawatt hours and sell it onto the spot market at some presumably highly profitable price. And I've had this running at my place now for a couple of years, and I've yet to notice when they take a snippet of power, but I'm sure it happens. Is that another kind of way of doing something like a virtual battery or a community battery that is on the right side of the meter?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way to do it with a virtual power plant. Obviously, it sounds like Sonnen are doing a good job running theirs. Be wary of any scheme run by an electricity retailer, because electricity retailers haven't covered themselves with glory over the decades in Australia. So a well-run VPP, yeah, it's a brilliant way to accelerate the payback of your battery and help the wider community by supporting the grid. Absolutely.
Yep. Fast running out of time. Here's a good one. Is a roof that is pitched east-west, meaning the ridge would be running north-south, and there's one side facing east, one side facing west. Is that okay for solar? Christine? Absolutely
it is. Of course, if you don't have a north-facing roof, you can definitely use east and west. And we've got a test site here as well, where we've got north-facing panels and we've got east and west-facing panels. And what we found from the research that we did was, although the north-facing panels, they performed a little bit better in winter, the east and west facing panels performed better than the north-facing panels in summer. So although you don't get the peak at the middle of the day with north-facing panels, your energy that you're producing is spread out across the morning and the afternoon. So earlier in the morning and later in the afternoon. And that's something that we found from our test site here.
Gareth's house being off-grid, of course, he's going for maximum winter, worst case scenario. So that's why yours north facing as they should be. Finn, do you have any thoughts about the east-west orientation?
Every roof direction in Australia is great for solar, apart from often south, but you can still get, I've got panels on my south facing roof. So yeah, east-west, it's great. You'll get a little less energy over 12 months, but you'll get more at the beginning and the end of the day, which is probably when you're using it. So they can often pay back faster than north-facing panels for solar-only houses.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. I'm sorry to all those people that are queuing up, and the questions about EVs. Look, tune into the next session. It's on EVs, so I'm sure some of the charging issues will be discussed there. But anonymous attendee, it's a great name. I wonder how they changed their name to deed poll to that. How efficient are ground-based solar panels that track the sun from dawn to dusk? Now, we used to see a lot of these back in the early 90s, as I recall, and I can remember setting up some jobs to have a space to do this, and they've just fallen off the radar completely. Why is that?
Oh, I can answer that if you like.
Yeah.
Go for it, Christine.
Oh, my only experience with ground mount tracking systems is really in that commercial utility scale stuff, and not necessarily so user-friendly maybe in residential areas.
Yeah, the extra cost and the extra complexity doesn't outweigh the doesn't pay for itself compared to just adding more panels residentially.
We looked at putting trackers on our panels, and in the end, it was so much simpler to just add another 2 or 3 panels than it was to all the, like Finn says, the complexity and the moving parts of a tracker. More than a great deal.
My late great mate, Dr. Chris Reardon, who was the principal author of the Your Home Technical Manual, just to give Your Home another little plug here, great sponsor. He designed and built himself a beautiful house in Goulburn, and it had a tracker on the northern kind of patio area, and I think it worked for about 3 years. And he ended up just fixing it and getting a small amount of power off that, and then putting fixed rooftop panels on. Look, we do have time for one more. What are the from Deb? What are the regulations around weight on roof for solar? Christine, do you want to talk about what roofs?
Well, it doesn't really become so much of an issue in our experience, because a roof is designed that a human body can walk across a roof. Now, that might be someone that's 80 to 100 kilos walking across a roof. The weight of a solar panel is spread across such a vast area with the railing as well, that the downward pressure of the weight of the solar panels, in my experience, has never been an issue. Occasionally in new builds, the engineer might want to know sizes and weights of solar panels so that they can make sure that the roof structure is okay. But generally, it's not something that can stop people from having solar panels installed. Different though to someone that's got a bang on awning that's over an al fresco area or something. If that's not structurally sound where a person could walk upon it, I definitely wouldn't want to be putting solar panels on that.
Yeah. The Tesla roof tile, the solar roof, that got a fair bit of publicity a couple of years ago. Where is it at?
It works. As they are Tesla, they're constantly refining the design, but at the moment, it's not available in Australia. It is available in America, but it's very, very expensive, especially it's expensive compared to an American solar installation, and an American solar installation is already 5 times the price of an Australian installation. So, it's very, very expensive way to go solar, but they look beautiful and they do work.
Anonymous has popped up again with probably a question worth addressing. My husband used to be a roof tiler. Can he install the panels himself and then engage an electrician to do the connections, I'm guessing? Can we talk about why that probably isn't a good idea?
Go on, Christine, sorry.
I personally, I would leave it to the experts. Yeah, there's a reason why it is additional licensing to be a solar installer on top of just a general electrical licensing. So certainly it's installing on your own rooftop on the property that you live on. Probably want to leave it to the experts.
In theory, you could engage a accredited solar designer to design the system. And then in theory, you could get some guidance and mechanically put the railing on and attach the panels and then get an accredited solar installer to check your work. But, it's going to be the first time you've done it. You're going to be unfamiliar with the racking. You obviously couldn't do any of the electrics. It would be much more efficient because Australian solar installers are so efficient. If you ever watch them work, much more efficient just to leave it all to the installer.
Okay. Seriously, last one. Could you please comment, this is from Ronlin, comment on roof or panel angle. We thought we'd design a new house for solar, but installer is saying that we need 30 degrees, not 10 degrees, and suggesting we put them on the ground. We've moved on from the ground thing, but what thoughts do you have about roof pitch and what works and what would not work?
10 degrees is generally the minimum you need for rain to run off. I've got a roof that's close to 10 degrees and I've got panels on there that I can see from my bedroom window and they stay remarkably clean in the rain, even when the birds do their business on them. So 10 degrees it's the minimum angle you want, but it works fine. Yeah, you don't need to put them on the ground, no.
Christine?
I'm unsure why the installer is wanting to install on a pitch that's 30 degrees, because really anything that's over a 25-degree pitch becomes physically quite a lot harder for the installers. Yeah, look, anything from 10 to 25 degrees is usually a pretty good pitch. I probably wouldn't want to be doing less than that because you do want the water to be able to run off them pretty smoothly.
Okay. Look, that's all we have time for. There is a good one here to the point where electrical vehicle batteries will be able to be used to feed back to the grid/house. And once again, I think that'll come up in the EV session. It certainly came up at last weekend's Fully Charged Live exhibition at Darling Harbour in Sydney. There was a whole panel session on it, including Saul Griffith, who is all about rewiring Australia at the moment. And so, yeah, look, tune in to the EV session for that one. But look, can I just say thank you very much to Gareth, to Christine and to Finn. Your contributions have been excellent, worthwhile and invaluable. So thank you very much. That's pretty much all we have time for. Our free sessions today are short and sharp, but don't forget that we're running the whole month with extension sessions to allow for a deeper dive into various topics. And you can log on and get yourself a pass there at $7.50 per 2-hour session. On that note, if you're in a position to, please consider supporting Renew, join up, subscribe. It all helps us to continue doing the amazing work that this organisation does. We hit goals unbelievably good, brilliantly, considering the fact that we run on the smell of an oily rag and have such passionate and dedicated staff, many of whom are working today on what should be their day off. So all of today's events are free, but even if you could give $10 or just join up, become a member, that would be a big help. So the next session on EVs starts at 3 p.m. in about 6 minutes' time. Thanks for joining us. It's been fun. See you later.